Okay, so in the second chapter, what we want to do is we want to kind of look at the content of our first impressions. If I see you, what am I trying to immediately figure out about you? And if you see me, what are you trying to figure about me? Is there something that we both would do, something similar? Is there certain content that we share? What are people in general trying to figure out of each other when they first see each other? Okay, so in the beginning of the first video, I showed you this picture of this gentleman, and I asked you to record or write down or note your impressions. So I have literally done this exercise with people in England, in Germany, in Korea, in India, and the US. And this is what about 80% of the people say. It's like, oh, he looks like a nice grandpa. He looks a little bit like a scientist, maybe he's a researcher, a scholar, a little bit, maybe he works in a library, something like, he looks kind of old and nice, but a little bit maybe kind of like the hapless grandfather that lives around the corner and always has a little bit of candy for children in his pockets, kind of a type of person. At some point, somebody in the audience will always be contrarian and will simply like, oh, it looks weird, I don't trust him, or something like that. So be honest, what did you think about him? Would you trust him? Would you not trust him? What is your impression of him? So if you do this, and scientists, psychologists have done this for literally hundreds of studies, they kind of ask people to judge other people. They showed them descriptions of their traits, their characters. They showed them pictures, and they asked them, what are your impressions? What do you think about this person? Then you can see that people obviously here, they name a lot of different words. But what we can do is we can order them using statistical analysis such as factor analysis or clustering, and we can see that there are these two fundamental dimensions. The first one, the most important one, is whether you or I are good or bad, whether we are warm and cold. So here's like, this is often also called warm and cold, this dimension, and we will often refer it in the rest of our lectures and the rest of our videos in this episode as warm and cold. But you can think a little bit about it just like as trustworthy or not trustworthy, but also as kind of, is this person on my team or not on my team, okay? So there's this fundamental dimension where I'm trying to figure out, okay, should I approach this person warm or should I avoid that person cold? This seems to be the first thing everyone tries to figure out. So if I see you the next time, I'm trying to figure out if you are cold or warm. And the next thing we try to figure out, at least according to research, is whether somebody else is kind of competent and intelligent or not. So you can see here, this is the second dimension. Here is like kind of intellectually bad, and he is intellectually good. You can check incompetent and competence. So most often these dimensions are called competence and incompetence, but names vary. And then you can kind of look at different types of words people are using to describe others and how to basically arrange them on these dimensions. So somebody who's critical is kind of smart, but is also rather cold, right? And somebody who's really good-natured is not so intelligent, but is really warm. Okay. A reliable person tends to be modestly intellectual, but really warm, and so forth. Okay. So what you can see is that our impressions, when we form impressions of each other, there are these two fundamental dimensions. The first one, which I always call like, are you on my team or not? Are you warm or not? Can I trust you or not? And the second one is competence. Are you competent or incompetent? And we come a little bit later in one of the following videos about why we form these impressions. But this is just descriptive. This is what we find, okay? So this kind of jives very nicely with classic research in social psychology research on person perception done by Ash in the 40s of the last century. So what he did is he basically showed people traits. He would say like, oh, here's one person, intelligent, determined, warm, industrious, practical, skillful, cautious. So here you can see again, this is the critical word. There's warm. And then this is in one condition. You ask them people to form kind of global evaluations of that person. And in the other condition, he used the same words, but he used cold as well. So instead of warm, he used cold. And what you can see here, and this is in one condition, is the cold condition. All the words are the same words, right? It's just one word is different. And you can see that this one word has a tremendous impact on the evaluation of that person. So if it's cold, people dislike that person. If it's warm, then people like that person. And other kind of synonymous words like polite or blunt do not have that impact on the evaluation of that person. So it seems like that warm, cold, kind of on my team, not on my team, is one of the key factors for us to determine how we evaluate a person. But now you might ask, well, is it just evaluation, or does it actually matter for behavior? Does it matter if I see you and I think you're warm? Am I more likely then to act towards you in a favorable way? So let me just quickly erase these two bubbles there. I'm not sure why they're still there. That's probably, you can see, this is my second or third run through this. Okay, back to the topic. Let's imagine that I would introduce Stian next as a guest lecturer. And I would say, okay, Stian Reimers, he's coming and he will give a little bit of a guest lecture, and thereafter he will guide and lead a discussion with you guys. And here's a little bit something about Stian. People who know him consider him to be rather cold, to be a rather cold person, industrious, critical, practical, and determined. Okay, so this is one condition. And in the other, I would describe him as the same, but now I would use very warm person. And this is a research done by Kelly in the early 50s of the last century. And what you see is that this rating, this description, matters for how you would then thereafter engage with Stian. Not only would you perceive his lecture as much, much better if you learn, as like better done as, when you learn that he's very warm compared to cold, but you would also be more likely to engage with him in the group discussion. You would be about more than 50% of the students engaged with the person that was described as very warm in the beginning and did not engage. Only a third did engage with the person that was very cold. So there seems to be a behavioral dimension to that, right? That if I think you're a warm person, then I'm more likely to act pro-social to you. There's a recent study that's really famous, and that's also cited in our textbook, and that is by John Barch. I talked about it the last time shortly. I just want to mention it again. So here John Barch said, like, maybe it is even enough if I just hold the warm coffee cup. So I hold the warm coffee cup, and then, for instance, I have to evaluate you. And what he finds is that if I hold this warm coffee cup, then I'm more likely to judge you as a warm person, and I'm also more likely then, like in line with Kelly's research that I just showed you, to approach you and help you. And compare that if I, for instance, have to hold a cold pack while making an evaluation of you. But this is a study that did not replicate. It seems like that this kind of unrelated cue of warm or cold, whether like my hand is warm or cold, does not really prime me to kind of think that you're a warm or nice person or a cold and not so nice person. So this is really important, right? There's like the logic is there, but it's not, there's a limit to that, how we can manipulate it. It seems to have at least something to do with the person. Now, here are two kind of things that I think are really interesting if you think about it and kind of help us to understand a little bit like the weird behavior that happens in the political arena. So remember when Trump was running for presidency, he was fighting against Hillary Clinton. And one of the key strategies of Hillary Clinton was to attack Donald Trump's competence. She would make fun of him. She would point out that many of his enterprises are bankrupt, that he's often kind of like is losing more money in his companies than actually gaining money and so forth, and he doesn't really have a clue how to be a president. Yet, as you know, that didn't really work out. And I think the idea here is, and that's somewhat speculative on my side, but the idea here is that intelligence or competence comes second. If I am a person who believes that Donald Trump, and if I'm an American and I believe that Donald Trump is on my side, he's warm, so to say, he's a person that I can trust, he's on my team, right? The primacy of warmth, right? Then it doesn't really matter that much whether he's competent or not. Obviously, I want to have somebody on my team who's warm and competent, but I'd rather have somebody on my team who's incompetent than have a president like Hillary Clinton, who I perceive as a Trump voter as to be not on my team and is super competent. That's rather threatening, right? There's my enemy, and my enemy is super competent. So by applying competence, you can only achieve so much if you don't have first the warmth or the my team, not my team categorization on your side. The other thing is, which I think is often interesting, is what are the cues we use to figure out if a person is on our team or not. So, right, if you're a politician, so in England, for instance, here you see Ed Miliband and you see Theresa May. So both of them, at the pictures were taken at the time when they were both running to become prime minister. On the left, you see Ed Miliband somewhat awkwardly eating a bacon bap, and I think it's a sandwich filled with bacon. And on the right hand, you see Theresa May somewhat awkwardly eating chips. And so this made news headlines, right? You can see here it was on a front page of the Sun. It's like, oh, you can't trust this guy. Look how he's eating the sandwich, right? And this also was a big topic in The Guardian, politically on the other side, where it's like, look at Theresa May. The way she eats these chips, she can't be one of us, right? And so there is this idea that we need to kind of figure out who's on our team or not by trying to find, like, what's a really good signal that we can use, right? And we might think, well, obviously all politicians come to us and say, like, you know what, Andreas, I'm on your side. I'm always for German immigrants to England who have a PhD. That's exactly the people I root for. Why don't you lend me your vote, right? And then I tell her, like, but how is she drinking the beer? And it's like, oh, she's drinking the beer incorrectly. She can't be a friend of Germans, right? So this is kind of, we are using kind of weird cues to see if somebody is on our side. And like eating is one of these cues, right? As a politician, you have to go wherever you go, somebody puts something in front of you and wants to see how you eat that in order to kind of evaluate whether you're on my team or not, okay? So this idea of trying to figure out on my team or not, is trustworthy or not, warm or not, by using kind of subtle cues is a very powerful, who often kind of helps us to understand somewhat bizarre behaviors. Why are we caring so much about how people eat their sandwich or their chips when we decide who should run this country for the next years? So just to kind of wrap it up, in the first video I ended by highlighting, right, these different ways of handling the cognitive overload, the information overload, and the uncertainty. And you can use that, right? If I meet another person, I can't be sure whether that person is nice or not, whether I can trust that person or not, whether that person is competent or not. So I have to use kind of like, maybe there's too much information about this person. So I have to use some kind of shortcuts, right? I have to be a cognitive miser. It's like, you know what? I don't want to kind of engage in a really lengthy evaluation of that person's character. I just kind of go with my gut. Whatever I feel when I see that person, that's what I'm going to with. Or you might feel like, well, I don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty about how politicians, they often lie, right? They say they're on our team, they're not on our team. They say they will do something, they will not do something. How can I do that? How can I figure that out? That's really difficult. Hence, I have to use kind of quick heuristics, quick, easy steps to evaluate that. That would be like a one where I kind of use the chips, maybe. So instead of having this complicated to answer, I substitute it with an easy answer, and then I can kind of see, okay, that person is not the right person because they're not eating the chips the way I want them to eat. Or you can make the case for person perception here on first impressions, on motivated cognition. I really want Theresa May to be not on my side. I'm hoping that. And now she eats these fries in the right, or these chips in the wrong way. And now I can justify it. So there is something that motivates me to believe that this is a really good indicator of her lack of loyalty to my person, and hence I should not vote for her.